Hi, I'm Martin Sullivan. I'm an adjunct trustee on the Walter S. Johnson Foundation, and I am joined here with my grand aunt, Gloria Eddie, who is the longest serving trustee on the history of the foundation. And we are joined here to talk about her dad, Walter S. Johnson, and the beginning of the foundation. Gloria, thank you for taking some time to talk about your dad and how the foundation began. What can you tell me about your dad and what kind of man he was?
Well, I'm prejudiced because I'm his daughter.
I hope so.
He was a wonderful man. Some people thought he was a genius. I never thought that because I think geniuses are a different type of person. He was generous. He was friendly. He had a very good work ethic, a hardworking person.
Walter S. Johnson was born November 10th, 1884 in Saginaw, Michigan to Alfred A. Johnson and Mary A. Calkins. That strong work ethic that he had, do you really think that came from his time growing up?
I think it influenced him a lot. He adored his father, and he and his father and his brother had spent a great deal of time together when he was a young child. They traveled all over California.
Like covered
with
wagon, right?
Covered wagon
Yeah.
and a horse.
Walter, his father, and brother traveled from California to Oregon and back, eventually settling in Arizona, where Walter attended a private school.
And he went to a Mormon school because there weren't any other schools around. And even though he wasn't a Mormon, but he went there, very good school. He took a commercial course in business and learned things like accounting, business law, and how to judge a business, I think. I think he got a lot of good training out of that course.
It must have been a good school.
Yeah, it was an excellent school, and I think he was there for at least 2 years. That's where he met Eddie Lee, who was also a student there.
Oh, okay. And Eddie Lee came back into the picture years later.
Yes.
Once the foundation had been established.
Yeah.
Now, when he lived in Arizona with his dad and his brother for a while. After he graduated, his dad encouraged him to move to San Francisco with his mom because of the opportunities that were there.
Yes. And he was able to get a job on the Call newspaper, which became the Call Bulletin, and that became eventually the Examiner, which was a large newspaper for a good many years.
And now, when he moved to San Francisco, it was right around the time of the big earthquake.
Yes.
And he helped out a lot of people during that time, but he started falling in love with philanthropy. And how did that kind of take place?
San Francisco recovered finally a few years later, and yet the earthquake and the fire had devastated the city. It was no longer regarded as a headquarters for finance or anything else. It had sort of lost its prestige, and the mayor was able to get together a whole group of philanthropists to give to San Francisco the 1915 fair, which included the Palace of Fine Arts. And it was a beautiful fair. People came from all over. The President Taft was there. Henry Ford was there. Very prominent people. It was a glorious time for the people of San Francisco, and they're celebrating right now for 100 years of since the Panama Pacific Fair.
And that was very focused on philanthropy and bringing
Yeah.
a lot of those
Yeah.
people around. And so Grandpa Johnson got to really experience that level of generosity.
He watched while the philanthropists of San Francisco got together and raised millions of dollars in order to get the fair going. And it impressed Dad a lot that they could do this together. And he was interested in philanthropy, I think, from then on, because he became one of the founders of the San Francisco Opera, and he supported a lot of their institutions.
Walter went on to become a notable businessman and philanthropist in San Francisco. After working briefly as an attorney and serving in World War I, Walter became one of the founders of the American Forest Products Corporation, a Fortune 500 company in the 1950s and 60s, and of Frieden Incorporated, the Frieden Calculating Machine Company developed and sold electromechanical numerators and office equipment, predecessors of today's computerized counterparts. Walter remained active in the management of both companies until well into his 80s. What was your fondest memory of your dad?
Well, I have a couple of memories. When on his 90th birthday, he was at the ranch, and there was going to be a party for all the family members in the afternoon and for lunch. But Dad loved to ride horseback, and he wanted to celebrate his 90th birthday on horseback to begin the day. And he asked me to go to the barn with him, and I did, and he was going to ride with his foreman, Bob Stewart, up to the top of the hill, which he usually did on a Sunday morning, but he hadn't been doing it for about a month. And the horse knew that. And when he got on the horse reared up, and Dad slipped down and fell down on the cement. And my heart leapt, and I thought, my gosh, what's happened to Dad? What happened is he climbed back on the horse and did his usual ride with Bob Stewart up to the top of the mountain and down, and then joined the party in the afternoon. The other story about Dad was he had been a heavy smoker all his life, and his lungs were giving out, and he couldn't really speak, but he could whisper, and the doctors didn't expect him to live more than a day or so. And I was talking to him, and he looked up at me with a faint smile, and in a whisper he said, "My cup runneth over." So he had had a wonderful life, and he was passing away in a very happy, healthy way.
Mr. Johnson passed away in 1978, but not before handing over the reins of the Walter S. Johnson Foundation to his eldest daughter, Gloria. So, your dad started the foundation, and his wife ran it for a short time.
Yeah.
But then you came to be president in 1973. How did that come about?
I was at the ranch, and he said, "Come on, let's take a walk up the hill." So we did, and finally found a pretty knoll where a grassy knoll, and he said, "Why don't you sit down and we'll just visit?" So we did, and he said, "Gloria, I have a foundation and I want you to run it." And it didn't make much sense to me because I didn't know he had a foundation. And how could he want me to run a foundation?
I don't know if you kept track of all the years, but you were the president of the foundation for 36 years, from 1973 to 2009. When you took over the foundation it was valued at around $225,000.
Yes.
And at the end of your presidency, and still today, it's around plus or minus $100 million foundation. So I think Grandpa Johnson picked the right person. And it may have been pretty stressful and nerve-wracking when you first got into it, but you've done a fantastic job of it. Now, before he started the foundation, or even in the beginning of the foundation, what were his big charities?
While he did have the foundation, he gave to the Palace of Fine Arts in increments, starting, well, he had been the president of the League of the Palace of Fine Arts. And that league is what kept this thing going for many years, of trying to retain and restore the Palace of Fine Arts, which had been constructed by Bernard Maybeck in some kind of almost like paper. And the rain and everything had just about ruined it. But people could remember how much it had meant to San Francisco, and it was still a lovely building even in its ruins. Mm-hmm. And people of San Francisco really wanted that to be rebuilt.
Let's talk about the palace for a minute. The city of San Francisco was considering demolishing it because it was in ruins.
Yeah.
And all total, Grandpa Johnson contributed $4 million, just over $4 million to its reconstruction.
Yeah.
But more importantly, coming into that project encouraged other philanthropists to contribute to the project as well.
Yeah.
And if that had not taken place, we may not have the Palace of Fine Arts today. He also took a big interest, and you'd mentioned Eddie Lee from his childhood when he went to school. Eddie started a foster youth program in San Francisco that's still in existence today, and that's something that Grandpa Johnson really wanted to focus in on during the early years of the foundation.
Yes, his friend Eddie Lee had started a foundation down in Los Angeles, and there were lots of boys that needed help, and she got them into foster homes, and he was quite interested in that.
Would you say that the main vision that he had for the foundation, though, is primarily the foster youth and the really the kids?
I think he really wanted to support young people. I think that was very important to him. I think that he would be amazed and delighted if he could see that how we're doing now with the fourth generation coming on and taking an interest. I think he'd be just delighted.
He had a very big heart for the children, and especially underprivileged children, foster youth children.
Yeah.
And we've done a very good job, well, you've done a very good job in keeping the foundation focused in those areas.
I think so. I think it gives credit to the to the foundation and to the grants department and to the people that are in charge of that part of it. Mm-hmm. But the financial part is also how we keep going. Mm-hmm. We need that.
Did your dad leave you with any words of wisdom for managing the foundation?
I was intimidated about it, and all he said is, Gloria, you can handle it. Don't worry about it. You'll be able to handle it. And he wanted me to be sure to keep with the same kind of grants that he and I had worked on while he was living.
So as the foundation transitions on to the fourth generation, typically the hardest transition for foundations to go through, are there any words of advice and wisdom that you would like to leave the oncoming generation?
Yes, I think so far I'm delighted that everybody is really interested in it, and my advice is, I think you're doing a wonderful job, and I just hope you keep it up.